Welcome to episode 225 of the Aegis podcast. Great to have you with us today. Today, we have a conversation with Rudy Inaba. And Rudy is the Vice President of Performance Health at Cinegenics. So we're going to be talking about what a place like Cinegenics does. They've been in the game for about 28 years. There's a lot of these sort of longevity practices sprouting up, and I was really curious to talk to the OG in the space, which is Cinegenics, and hear what their focus is. One of the most interesting things that we're going to be talking about is the importance of VO2 Max. Just old school physical fitness training, what a huge part that plays in longevity.
Every decision you make is the potential for a win. And when you look at it that way, you can start to get this progress and this traction, which can massively accelerate your lifestyle changes. You know, there's like all these other things like that I wish people knew that they could like pop the hood on to see like, all right, blood sugar management, lipid management, inflammatory marker management. Because if you look at all that data and you see all the things that are relevant to your health span and longevity that can be improved, if you're putting in work, it's impossible to not have a positive influence on that.
I want to add, if you're not part of our community here at Aegis, please join us. We make this amazing thing called the Aegis newsletter. We put it out every week. You can go to aegis.com/newsletter to join. It's just this jewel we've been putting out for 10 years. Have a look at that. And then if you can, we also have social channels on Instagram. We have a pretty big following there. Go to @WeAreAegis and follow us there too. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment after a quick message from our sponsors. Rudy Inaba, we're going to be talking about longevity medicine. Here's some news. This week, visit Troscriptions, and you're going to save 20% on everything that they sell to celebrate their 5-year anniversary. So Troscriptions, TROSCRIPTIONS.com. They make some really amazing products, and I will tell you, I have been using their Autoimmune product for, about 8 months now, every night, and I haven't gotten sick, and everybody around me has. So, cordycepin, really powerful. Check them out. They've got a lot of good things there, and it's 20% off.
Today's show is brought to you by Timeline Nutrition with their breakthrough product, MitoPure, the first clinically tested urolithin A supplement, which is showing tremendous results for mitochondrial health. Go to timelinenutrition.com/Aegis, use the code Aegis at checkout, and save 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Today's show is also brought to you by LMNT, spelled LMNT. Go to drinkelement.com and get yourself a free 8-serving sample pack with the purchase of any of their electrolyte drink mixes.
One thing I want to mention that after we did this interview, Cinegenics has invited me to Los Angeles to visit their facility and see what goes on there. So I'm going to be doing that in a few weeks, and I'll keep you updated on that. We're going to have some filming going on there. I'm very curious about the technologies that they're being used. And since they've been doing this for 28 years, it's really interesting. They'll have patients that they've been working with for 15, 20 years. So there aren't a lot of other places out there that have done that. So I'm really curious to see what's been working for them and what their goals are with patients now versus how it was, say, 28 years ago. We're going to get with Rudy right now. Rudy, where does this podcast find you today?
I'm actually headquartered in Las Vegas. I do travel to a lot of our centers very often, but I have been in Las Vegas now when I first started with the organization in 2009.
What's the winter in Las Vegas like? It's like the tundra. I'm in New York. It's freezing here. What's it like where you?
Not as cold in New York, so I can give you that much. But in the wintertime, it gets pretty cold in the desert. And Vegas is high desert, so 40, 50 degrees, maybe sometimes like 30 degrees at nighttime. But my son, he's a ice hockey player, so we're at the rink 5 days a week, it feels like. So we're always in a cold environment, winter or summer, it doesn't really matter. So, all I know is when it's very hot up here.
You're the guy with the parka, like in some, like.
Yes, that is all the hockey moms at the rink. They all have the big jackets on.
So tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are today?
I'm an 80s kid. So growing up, I watched the Schwarzenegger movies, Stallone movies, and, the sports, watching, baseball and football, and I always, was impressed with guys who were physically built. So, working out and lifting weights became a big hobby of mine, got into, had a big interest in bodybuilding. And then, that really helped identify, what kind of track I wanted to do for my education. So I went exercise science for my undergrad with a concentration in cardiac rehab in Pennsylvania. And then I actually moved to Vegas, originally to UNLV, for my master's program in clinical exercise physiology. And when I was in my undergraduate degree, getting ready for one of my part-time jobs, I was eating dinner and there was an episode on longevity on 60 Minutes. And it was this, Rolls Royce that pulls up into this White House looking building with palm trees. And then it cuts to a 60-year-old guy who's the founder and physician, bench pressing at, Gold's on Flamingo and Sandhill, which was like the big bodybuilder gym in the day. And then he's making meals and, just living this lifestyle that I live. I'm like, this guy's awesome. Like, I want to be this guy. And then it starts talking about Cinegenics, about this, facility in Las Vegas that is seeing patients and looking at various elements in the blood and doing DEXA scans and VO2 max tests and, coaching and following up on these different therapies, implementing different things potentially to influence testosterone, optimizing sleep. And I was like, this place is incredible. And, I was 22 at the time, packed up my stuff, went to my next job and, was all right. Well, like the place was awesome, but I didn't really think about it again until I actually moved to Vegas and I see a billboard front and center on the freeway of Cinegenics. And I was like, oh my God, like it's a sign. So I went to the office and met with the team. I had a DEXA scan done and just shared like, hey, I'm going to, graduate school right now, but if there's ever a position open, like I would love to be considered. And, played my cards right and a position opened up and I jumped at the opportunity. And I've been incredibly fortunate to be with the team ever since.
Rudy, paint me a picture of 22-year-old Rudy. What are you doing?
22-year-old Rudy was in an apartment in Pennsylvania, being a personal trainer, working at a tanning salon, and bouncing on the weekends while going to school. But I was the bouncer that was reading like the studies from the New England Journal of Medicine, like before I was going on shift. So I was always had an interest, but took advantage of like my size, I guess, and made money how I could.
That's funny. It's a specific place.
Influenced by Arnold. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
When you started at Cinegenics, what was that like?
It was awesome. The coolest thing for me as a guy with my background, with my academic background in personal training is like when I was at school, like there was this often thought of like you could either go in the clinical track where you're like working in like a hospital setting, rehabilitative setting, like and that's kind of like your role for this degree. Or you could go into like the strength and conditioning track or like coaching or personal training, whatever it might be. And, I was always kind of torn by that. Like, I didn't really like want to do like completely one or the other, but that's where like Cinegenics has been really a godsend, is because for me as like an individual in this space it's the best of everything, because when patients come into our facilities using things like the DEXA scan, VO2 max test, doing ultrasounds on their carotid arteries, operating the 3D, musculoskeletal scans, doing the brain EEG assessments, looking at blood work, assessing the blood work, and then tying in, the coaching element. So like looking at blood work for carbohydrate metabolism and lipid management and inflammation, making the nutritional changes there that I need to based off of the labs and also the DEXAs and all these other things. And then also the training programs based on maybe the weaknesses in the VO2 or the weaknesses in the muscular endurance and muscular strength testing we do. Like it merges the coaching human like performance element with the like data acquisition side, and then following up on that regularly to then drive those outcomes and then retesting that every single year to see how far of the improvements we've made. And it's like, it's super exciting. And it's honestly like, again, so blessed to be able to use my knowledge base and my, my communication skills to not just, be a tech, and I can do all of these things and be a part of a person's journey.
And what's your favorite part about working with your patients?
Well, I think the problem solving. I know like probably a generic answer would be like, well, I love to see my patients succeed, which obviously we all do, right? Like we want to see people succeed. We love their success. But like, I love like solving problems. And like when someone is like, hey, I went skiing and I took a spill on my knees killing me, but I want to still train, like what can I do? Or what nutraceuticals could I possibly use to help speed up this recovery process? Or, what do you think I should discuss with my Cinegenics physician around either different peptides or different treatments that I could use like temporarily to try to accelerate my recovery process? Like, I love that. Like, I love seeing like different elements of like a challenge or like an obstacle, and then picking that apart and then trying to find those solutions with the tools and resources we have available to get that patient back on track. There's a great book that I read every year. It's called Obstacle is the Way. It's by Ryan Holiday. And it's just like it's the obstacles away. Like I love those obstacles. It's like there's no way around it. Like just go, just figure it out. And I think from a clinical perspective, treating patients, but also like what I would use your data to prescribe you a training routine is not necessarily what I would prescribe for everyone as a training routine as well, because some people are maybe coming in with 10 years or 20 years of very limited exercise experience and maybe less than 4,000 steps per day. So in that scenario, like I'm going to probably put the discussion around the aerobic target heart rate and the anaerobic target heart rate, the recovery rate, all in the back burner, and just focus on getting some like strategic volume and movement, and then graduate from there and progress someone correctly. But again, it goes back to the N of one, is that we collect all this data and we implement all these principles, but the degree of which those principles are utilized by each person is going to vary because they are their own unique individual with their own unique past experiences.
And to people who are listening, the changes that you can make in your physiology, VO2 max, especially if you're on the lower end, really quickly.
Yeah.
Really quickly make some pretty major improvement. And as you said, it's really, if you're in the lower quintuple and you go up one, that's an unbelievable increase in, essentially your life expectancy.
Yeah. And it's a lever that when that lever gets pulled, it changes a lot of other things too, like in your blood work. And that's one of the things that we do at baseline and also like quarterly throughout all of our memberships. When you start to focus on improve, like if your goal is to improve your VO2 max, right? You're going to get your training in, you're going to fuel yourself correctly for optimal performance. You're going to have better sleep probably because you're getting more active, and you're going to have better rest. You're going to do all these lifestyle things that are associated with just improving your VO2 max performance. And what you'll also see is your fasting glucose, fasting insulin, and your hemoglobin A1C start to reduce. You can even build some lean tissue so that glucose can now be stored in muscle as muscle glycogen. You'll also see your high sensitivity C-reactive protein likely coming down because exercise, while it's acutely inflammatory for recovery, it is an anti-inflammatory pill, essentially. Like exercise is the best thing that we could potentially put in a pill. And when you also look at the changes in lipids, some people may not see a rise in HDL, but you certainly see an improvement in triglycerides. You'll see an improvement in most cases in LDL and even apolipoprotein B. It has so much positive influence. And then when you incorporate things like DEXAs, you'll see reductions in visceral fat or android fat. You'll see improvements in lean muscle mass. You see so many good things because when people talk about longevity and health span and really optimizing their lives, there's so many things we could talk about, right? There's so many topics. It's like we could drown in it. But just by focusing on like VO2 and improving your fitness, you're indirectly improving so many other things.
It's really, you probably get this question. I get it all the time. People are like, well, what about XYZ? If I swallow this, if I do this exotic thing, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's gonna move you like a tiny bit. You really want to move the needle? It's the basic stuff.
Yeah,
like this.
Yeah, no, we actually talk about that in our physician training. Is that there's the core fundamentals, right? And that's going to be your exercise, your nutrition, like foundational treatments and therapies. And then the periphery out in the fringe are things that are, there's truth behind them, but how far will they move the needle essentially is the big question. And that's where you get things like, put red pepper on my food to increase my metabolism, or, should I drink, really, really cold water because my body has to heat it up and I'm having some kind of thermogenesis. Well, yeah. So, but people see these questions in different channels, of mediums of media. And, it's tough. Like there's a lot of noise out there. And I think, having, specialists, whether they're listening to your podcast or they're, talking to our physicians or they have a team, people that they can have as a trusted resource to sift through a lot of the cool, like attractive, like, bright lights and like, look at me things, but things that maybe won't deliver on the outcomes they're looking for, and going to their trusted leaders and authority figures around like, all right, these are the real things that you should be doing on a day in and day out basis that are really going to positively influence your health, fairly quickly in relation to other elements.
Tell me a little bit about Cinegenics. I remember from like the mid 90s. Am I right?
Yeah, no, Cinegenics started in 1997, actually here in Las Vegas. And in less than 10 years after they opened, started to expand nationally into other different regions and major MSAs throughout the country. And right now we have 21 centers across the country. I'm fortunate to lead a team of performance health coaches at all of our locations. And I can, say with, an extreme amount of trust that, our coaches are so fantastic and are so incredible. I think collectively, we have over something like 250 years of academic experience and like hands-on personal training experience, throughout our time, working in the field. We all communicate, on a daily basis in our Teams threads on how we can optimize and assist with certain patients and, nuances that we're all experiencing. But, back to Cinegenics is that, they started in 1997 and really it was a way to, can we optimize someone's health and like not have the quote unquote typical experience that people are going to see their parents go through, like where they start to get older, they're starting to get sick, they're not really moving around a whole lot, they need, care, they go into hospitals, it's risky if they're going to come out or not. Like how can we avoid that? And the discussion then moved into, all right, well, there's obviously things we can do in nutrition. There's things that we can do from an exercise perspective. Not to say that everyone needs to be super militant with like doing the same training program every single day, but seeing like what parameters we need to evaluate and keep tabs on to make sure that, they are in an optimal range where we're reducing our risk for disease. And then it gets into like the different blood work that we can evaluate, and also from the hormone side too. What things can we do safely and what practices can we put in place to ensure safety is at the forefront and being managed throughout the course of the program. And the program started to take off. And that's why we expanded so rapidly in a fairly, quick amount of time once we did decide to expand. And, I'm fortunate enough to be with the organization since 2009. And I get to still talk to patients that started when I also started. So like, 15 plus years deep, they've been on program. And, there's no looking back. Like it changed their lives so dramatically because, we talk about squaring the curve of aging. I don't know if that resonates. But typically, like when you have the curve of aging, you start to decline here as like your 30s and 40s, you're building a career, your health is good, but you're not paying attention to it. And all of a sudden, like you retire, but then you have to deal with your health that you neglected for so long. We want to optimize that health all the way, so square the curve of aging. So,
Right.
Healthy and functional and thriving and vibrant until, we go on to the next chapter, whatever that may be. And, that's how our patients like truly live their lives, which is really exciting to see. They're coming in every year for their VO2. They're having their phlebotomists come to their homes every 3 months to get their blood work done to make sure all the different parameters from their, metabolic health parameters, their hormonal health parameters are all accurate. And they engage in some of the specialty labs that are kind of new and cool that people want to look at, like DNA methylation. But it's the desire to not just thrive, but like to pursue, it sounds cheesy, right? But to pursue greatness, like how can I be the greatest version of myself? And I think, when you really embody that as you get older, you're never going to be old, right? Like if you have the drive to like live well and to be around and not think like, oh, like I better do this last trip to Europe because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to, go again in the next, 5-10 years because I'm getting older. Like you're kind of like setting yourself up for like some challenges of making those things happen. And, our patients, it's great to see. Some of them come into our programs, maybe a little gun shy, maybe a little hesitant. They feel like they're doing the right thing, but they don't know what to expect. But then as the years go on, it's like really the best thing that they could have done because they can't see their lives being lived any other way.
There's nothing wrong for trying to become the best version of yourself.
I mean, that's almost a duty, right? That's almost a duty.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be back in just a quick moment after our word from our sponsors. We all want to think clearer, feel better, and perform at our peak, but brain fog, stress, and fatigue can get in the way. That's where Troscriptions comes in. Troscriptions isn't just a supplement company. They're a team of doctors, scientists, and biohackers creating pharmaceutical-grade, precision-dosed nootropics that help you optimize your mind and body. Unlike traditional supplements, those small, dissolvable squares bypass digestion and deliver fast, effective results. Whether you need deeper focus, stress relief, better sleep, or stronger immunity, Troscriptions has science-backed solutions for you. Some of their top formulas include TroCalm for instant stress relief and a sense of balance. They have TroImmune, which I use every day. It's a powerhouse immune and inflammation fighter with cordycepin to keep you resilient. There's blue carotene, a game-changing nootropic for sustained energy, sharp focus, and cognitive performance. Personally, I've been using Troimmune all winter, and I haven't gotten sick. Not only does it boost my immunity, I'm sleeping deeper, waking up more refreshed. If you're serious about upgrading your brain and your body, check out Troscriptions, because better performance starts with better biochemistry. Here's some news. This week, visit Troscriptions, and you're going to save 20% on everything that they sell to celebrate their 5-year anniversary. So Troscriptions, TROSCRIPTIONS.com. They make some really amazing products.
Today's show is brought to you by Timeline Nutrition and their product MitoPure. I started taking MitoPure after I ran their science through our science review board, and they were very enthusiastic about it. In fact, most of the people on my science advisory board and their families now take MitoPure. So why do I take MitoPure? I take it basically for health span because, the truth is, I want to be 90 and I want to be able to ski and hike and play and do all the things I do now. Think of MitoPure as these little Pac-Men in your cells, chomping up the damaged mitochondria that make you feel old and tired and recycling them into new, healthy ones. And mitochondria are our cell's power generators. They're a key influence in how we age. However, as the years pass, and I've passed a few years, mitochondrial efficiency naturally declines, representing a large gap in the quality of life we can expect in our later years from the ones we actually experience. So do what I do, and do what my science advisory board does. We take it every day. You're going to notice a difference in 4 to 6 weeks. Timeline is offering 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Go to timeline.com/ageist. That's TIMELINE.com/ageist. Get 10% off.
I remember way back, the jacked guy. Are you getting people who come in and they want that sort of super physiologic response?
Yeah, I mean, so those ads were definitely in a unique time in marketing and in media, right? Like the before and afters, and the line was how does this 60-year-old have the body of a 30-year-old, right? I can still hear it in my head, clear as day. But the great thing about those ads is that people remember them. It's been 20 years since we ran those ads, and people still have that recall. But the transformations that people do have are really amazing. But the thing that doesn't bug me, but the thing that's missed with those ads is that you don't see the other stuff. You don't see the really strong benefits of the improved hemoglobin A1C, the improved LDL, improved triglycerides, improved chronic inflammation. The intangibles of being able to get up in the morning, pain-free, energetic, go hit a 30-minute, cardio workout before breakfast, go have a 10-hour day in your work day, just nailing it, just completely crushing all the tasks that you need to do, and then getting a resistance training workout in and having dinner with your loved ones and having the energy, and then also being able to, have a passion with your spouse. There's all those things that a before and after photo failed to represent, which is okay. But, those are the things that really stand out to me for how our patients will. But, to your question is that many people do want to see, all right, what's this best muscular version of myself? And we had a lot of that when we had those ads. But honestly, now people, they want muscle mass. They want to be leaner. They want to be fitter. They want to thrive. They want to be vibrant. But, I think the consumer is way more mature these days that they're I just want to be that version for me. I don't need to be that, but I need to be what's right for me. And I think that's, a great place is that, the really nice thing is that consumers now are so much more educated. Yes, they have to sift through a lot of noise that's out there, but, generally speaking, there's a lot of education that's out there that, is, in the right direction. And so they're coming in asking really great questions, and they understand hey, I don't want to have this super physiological dose of testosterone to try and be this huge jacked person, but I do want to have healthy testosterone levels that are going to decrease my risk for having, a cardiovascular event, and they're going to allow me to recover, and it's going to allow me to sleep better and also have better sexual function. But I don't want to go far beyond, right? I want to go into that sweet optimal spot. And, that's the educated person's move. That is a fantastic move because it's sustainable. It's providing you with those benefits in your life that you're looking for, that you deal with from the day to day. And it's not taking things so far where if you have a bodybuilder doing super physiological dosing, you'll see HDL plummet, you'll see ApoB and LDL typically rise, you'll see, some maybe AST or ALT, like liver enzymes kind of go up. You'll see all these changes over time. But, by optimizing different hormones, whether it be via testosterone or like testosterone precursors, whatever it may be, doing that into optimal ranges of normal and repeating labs throughout the course of the year to ensure that those things are staying where they should be and they're not possibly going up or possibly going down. All data is good data. So when we collect this data with the labs, we know which things we may need to change. We may not change from a single lab, but if we see trends going up where, things look really good and we want to keep them on that path, or if we see trends where your A1C is starting to go up and I'm going to be like, hey, David, like, what are you doing? You like not telling me about the piece of cake you're having a couple nights a week? Like, let's talk. So we pick up on things by getting these labs and by having these consultations with our patients.
I love that. It sounds like we're in a different era now. I mean, there just wasn't any of this information back then like there is now. Even people in their, quite young in their 20s, they're really educated about health and health span and wanting to stay as healthy as possible for as long as possible in a way that I listen to, your background. And I also was not the healthiest 25-year-old, I got to tell you. It really wasn't what the game was back then. But, it's different now. I'm going to be going to Beverly Hills to the mothership, and they're going to do plasmapheresis on me, which I'm super excited about. And because I don't have a spleen, my spleen was removed. Yeah, I had this like horrible autoimmune thing like a decade and a half ago. Blood's not getting, cleaned the way it normally will. So when they told me about this, like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that. Can we speak about what that is?
A little bit. I mean, so our chief medical officer actually did a really great podcast on his channel that I think you two should probably talk to around the whole topic being plasmapheresis. And, what it's doing is that it's extracting, your plasma and it's being treated or replaced and cleaned and basically spun back into your blood. And for someone with autoimmune, that is a fantastic, therapy to utilize. So I'm very excited. So I didn't know you had a history of autoimmune. So that's perfect. I mean, you're actually a fantastic candidate. There's a lot of great candidates for it, but that's like a very strong use case. So I'm really excited for you. It's a brand new office space we moved into, and it's a new service we've been able to provide because, again, people are asking these questions. People want to see, what other things can I do? Because while the things I mentioned, like the diet, exercise, hormones, nutraceuticals, all these other things, like they move the needle significantly, there's going to still be some gaps of things that people have an interest in that could be beneficial, not only for their own personal health, but also just for their own general concepts around longevity. And that's where plasmapheresis can come in, which, for you, it's hitting the nail on the head with what your, needs analysis is. And for others, other things we're doing are different NAD therapies, either through IV or injections. We have all these other options too that people can incorporate that are, beneficial to give them more understanding, whether it be looking at their 22,000 genes through our full genomic testing, or whether it be looking at telomere length, which was a big one like 10 years ago. It's not as popular or interesting now, or even the nutritional genomics that we do when all of our new patients come in. We do a nutritional genomics assessment to identify what someone's individual risks are within various pathways of their health and how we can influence that by certain foods that we may select due to the compounds, whether it be sulforaphane or different vitamin C's for collagen production because someone has an injury potential. Some really cool stuff. So our services are wildly expanded and we can touch on many things. But for the plasmapheresis, I'm really excited that you're going to be in there within like our first set of clients to have that completed. So you're going to have to let me know how that goes.
I will. I think they're doing blood work on me next week, and then we'll probably do blood work afterwards. And it's something I only learned about this maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And it was like, at that point, like super exciting.
Yeah. It's still pretty exotic. I mean, it's not as exotic in like the longevity space that we're immersed in, but it's still exotic like in general. Like It's still very much like people don't really, I've never heard of it.
Well, just the idea, like we're gonna take out your plasma and we're gonna like cycle like some albumin in, and why would you do that? And there's a lot of good reasons to do it.
Yeah, there were actually, I went to A4M in December out here in Vegas, and there were probably maybe a handful, maybe at least 5 similar providers for plasmapheresis. And so it's certainly expanding in the space.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. As you're looking like out the time horizon, the next 2 years forward, what are the sort of things that you're seeing coming your way? that will be incorporated that people can have access to?
That's tough. It's tough for us to evaluate because when we look at the longevity industry as a whole, there's many, many options we could do. We carry some things already that I think would be good examples to share. Like, we partner with a company that is a fully FDA cleared brain EEG. That was, prior to them, you had to get a $10,000 piece of equipment and in a hospital setting, get a EEG done of your brain to look at evoked potential. And now we have that outfitted in all of our facilities with full FDA approval. So that is a standard evaluation that we do on all of our patients when they come in for their assessment from a brain function perspective. We look at the labs, but we also do the EEG, and we also do a neurocognitive computer-based assessment to look at things like recall, short-term reaction time, executive function, and so on. So that's one thing that's a big one that, we didn't have prior because we didn't have access to it. That came from a hospital setting. Another one that we do that's interesting is, which, I think was very popular and it was presented as GainsWave, not to like throw the brand out, but it's acoustic ultrasound wand, where it's basically, you have this acoustic ultrasound wand and you do these ultrasounds, and it gained a lot of attention because for erectile dysfunction. Because essentially when you do it on the penile tissue, you actually it can show that you can expand capillaries and create the netting of the capillaries in the blood vessels so that you can fill more blood. But that's also used for tendinopathy with our patients that come into office in some of our locations where we are equipped there. Things like patellar tendinitis, quad tendinitis, tricep tendinitis, because one of the other things that we'll test is we do 3D musculoskeletal scans during the assessments. And as I'm telling you all this stuff, I feel like you should do more than just the plasmapheresis when you're in Beverly Hills, because we have all this in Beverly Hills. But we do 3D musculoskeletal scans where we assess over 1 million different data points on a person's body. And then we essentially score all the different joints of how they are stacked in relation to each other and assess what that injury risk is when they start to aim to optimize performance. And we actually develop...
I don't know about this. So I've never heard of this machine. So it's a 3D muscular skeletal scan, and what you're checking is the joint alignment.
Yeah. So what you do is you stand. So you have like little skivvies on, right? And you stand on this piece of machinery, and it rotates around you. It takes 30 to 60 seconds, and it's getting the 3D imaging, but it's looking at how the stacking of the joint mechanics and also the displacement of your feet and the weight. So we'll look at the ankles, we look at the arches, we look at the pronation and supination of your feet, we'll look at your ankle, knees, hips, different parts of the vertebrae, shoulders, cervical spine, the weight of the head against your cervical spine, because most people have a forward lean. And then we actually develop a daily, so the AI technology that we work with develops a daily movement plan, 15-minute movement plan for each individual scan results to implement. And it has people that have implemented those movements improve their scores by their next test like 100% of the time, which is fantastic.
Wow. This is, I haven't heard of this, and I have to say this is worth the price of admission. Like, knowing that, because it's, oftentimes we work with really, good PTs or Pilates people who really know what they're doing. But that's just sort of like they like eyeball it. They're like, well, you're a little bit, a little bit here or a little bit there. But unless they're really gifted people, it's very hard to diagnose why all these. There's a lot of bits to the chain here, right?
Well, that's why it's so important too. Like, I mean, it's not to have like this dichotomy between like, well, it's one or the other, but a multidisciplinary team is always better. And that's why, again, like not to like plug up Cinegenics, but that's why our patients do so well, because they have a multidisciplinary team. They have their physician, they have a network of physicians that they can learn from. They have their performance health coaches, not just one, but literally the whole network. And they have their coordinators that are providing their care. But same thing with the 3D musculoskeletal. Like, we have many patients that do have physiotherapists. Like I have my own here in Vegas where I'll do dry needling with the e-stimulation on it, and we'll do different, all different movements. But we can get those scans done, and I can maybe reference like, hey, I have some left shoulder pain, and this is what my scan's showing, and maybe calls out some things with my thoracic spine, or calls out some things with my cervical spine, or maybe calls out some things with how my scapula may be like winging out, certain degrees. And I can show that to him and be like, he can confirm it as a physical person, like on site, and be like, yeah, like let's do these movement patterns and see what's hurting you. And boom, you can figure out what the main issue is, and you can address it even more aggressively. It's, like collaboration is the key to success, and even it's the same when it comes to your personal health.
I mean, I don't turn this into a commercial for Cinegenics, but it's that so much of wellness, health, all of this stuff, it's very siloed, right? So you're dealing with people who are, my latest venture is my knee is a mess. So I spend a lot of time at hospital for special surgery, talking to the different people, but they're only looking at, like they're looking at MRIs, they move my knee around. They're not asking me what I eat. They're not looking at my blood work.
Yeah.
They're not doing like a whole skeletal thing. They're not saying like, oh, maybe your knee's off because, your head's in the wrong position. They're not looking at that. They're just drilling in on this one thing. They're super good at this.
Yeah.
But you really need you need the whole 360 here.
For your knee, like when we do nutritional genomics, one of the pathways we look at is joint and injury risk. And there's multiple genes that are put into a similar pathway around, increasing like a 3-fold increase in knee osteoarthritis, 2-fold increase in Achilles tendinopathy, ACL injuries. So like when we see our patients that have a 3D musculoskeletal scan where we see some potential for injury with a knee, we look at their nutritional genomics and see that they are of a high risk or high impact for this injury potential here. Not only do we know how to like prescribe their exercise routine so they're getting enough, time off, they're, focusing on stable movement patterns. We're not like throwing a Bosu ball at them or anything if they have like this significant risk of an injury. But then also from a nutraceutical perspective, like when you look at those nutrigenomic findings of like what's the main cause of them driving the injury risk, it's oftentimes that you can't make collagen, and that's going to have an issue with your vitamin C. So you need to bump up your vitamin C, bump up your protein intake, have more of these things, maybe collagen supplements that have been shown like collagen hydrolysate or type 2 hydrolysate, different things for the individual. Because if they want to start like running, for example, I'm going to be like, you're at a pretty high risk of like hurting your knee, even just from running. So, and it's also if you're carrying like, 20, 30 pounds on you when you first start. So, let's focus on maybe doing this other movement. Let's start these nutraceuticals. Let's build up the strength around your VMO of your quads. Let's start to work on some hamstring flexibility. Let's change this, this pelvic tilt that you have. And then we'll get there, but we have to do these prerequisites first to ensure that you're not going to be, on a surgery table, 6 months from now because you tried really hard and you hurt yourself but we saw the warning signs. We didn't do anything. Like we're going to do everything in our power to get this data, implement it accurately for you so that you can hit your goals, but also doing it in the most meaningful way possible.
Amazing. Tell me, what do you want to leave my people with? What I'm hearing here is this idea of just how we can holistically become the best version of ourselves and that we have agency on these things. And I think this is something that so many people assume that, well, okay, my hip hurts, that's just the way it is. If that's the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot that can happen here. And we're moving into a realm now of being able to put all these pieces together and to see what you eat affects your joints. It affects your sleep. This is all part of a puzzle. And unless you have like an organization, a system to look at all these pieces together, you're dealing with people who are very good at one thing, but maybe they see like 5% of the whole thing. And it's just hunt and peck until you sort of figure it out, which is time and resource consuming.
So what you said reminds me, when I was an undergrad, I worked at a gym and we would often do like seasonal like weight loss challenges and inches challenges. And one of the things you do is like when you're measuring someone's circumference measurements, like arms, upper arm, lower arm, legs, whatever, the goal is to like get multiple sites. Like that's why like when you look at skin fold measurements or circumference measurements to like use as an estimation for body composition, the ones that you have more sites of data on are the ones that give you more accurate outcomes. If you're engaging in things for your health span and longevity, get as much data on yourself as you can to start and understand that like repeating that's going to be important because there's so many perspectives of the story of your health that if you just look at 1 or 2 sites and you put in all the work for 3 months, 6 months, a year, when you repeat it and look at it, you may feel disappointed because maybe those 1 or 2 things that you looked at aren't really moving the needle a whole lot. And it would be incredibly unfortunate to take all that work you've had in that 3, 6, 12 months, whatever. And if you missed the view of all those other positive things that you changed. So when someone is just like only focusing on maybe like weight loss on the scale, right? There's a very easy example. And they're starting to eat more protein and they're eating fruits and vegetables and they are getting their exercise in. Maybe they're going to like a F45 or an Orange Theory, or even just getting more steps in. Maybe they're rucking with like a 20-pound weight in their backpack, anything, right? But then they get on the scale and like 180 pounds, 200 pounds is still 200 pounds, like, 3 months later, and people start to feel defeated. But understand, like, your DEXA could have improved significantly. Your CRP, your systemic inflammation, probably wildly improved if you stopped eating a lot of processed foods and too high of carbohydrates for yourself and started having more fruits and vegetables. Like your joints are feeling better. It's something you're not evaluating because you're not paying attention to it, but now you're stronger. So you don't, your joints don't take on the burden as much. There's like all these other things like that. I wish people knew that they could like pop the hood on to see, like, all right, blood sugar management, lipid management, inflammatory marker management, how my joints feel, what my lean tissue is, like how my fitness level is, how my heart rate recovery is after peak level of exercise. Because if you look at all that data and you see all the things that are relevant to your health span and longevity that can be improved, it's like, it's almost impossible. Like if you're putting in work, it's impossible to not have a positive influence on that. And I think people need to see those changes as a reward for themselves, to feel like all that work they're putting in is worthwhile. Like it is always worthwhile to put in the work for your health, whether it be in a single meal or whether it be, a 12-week workout program. Like taking things, making the best decision possible for yourself, like racking up as many wins, like every scenario you have that comes in through the day, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, if I should have a snack or if I should get a coffee at the drive-thru with no sugar or with sugar, like every decision you make is the potential for a win. And when you look at it that way, you can start to get this progress and this traction, which can massively accelerate your lifestyle changes.
I love the way you put that, Rudy. Everything we do is a potential for a win. And the thing is, you can start winning at any time.
Yes, absolutely. No. So my mother turned 70 in a week, and she's now been going to Orange Theory for like the past year. And she's like, I want to go into my 70s the most fit that I can possibly be. So she loves it, and it's cool for me because like I've been in the fitness world for so long. And, she's been active and, she, loves traveling and doing all the other things. But like to see her actually going to a gym and like having a coach and getting up into her anaerobic zones and, going on the rower, and I can talk shop with her on the rower because that's what I do too. It's super cool. Like, so it's never too late. It's just get started, like no matter what age.
Yeah. Little choices. We think about these things as sort of the ocean liner. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's okay, we're going to change the direction, but it's a lot of little decisions every day and, being consistent about it.
Yeah.
And the boat will move. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, sustainability wins all the time.
Rudy, this has been a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to going to Beverly Hills and seeing what that's all about. Now that I know about these new toys, which I didn't know about, I'm gonna say, well, I'm gonna come a little early.
Yeah, no, I will let the team know, because I do want you to get as much of those tests done as you can, because I know it means a lot to you, and I know you're going to utilize that data. So let's get that done.
100%. Rudy, thank you so much for your time today. I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing, and I think a lot of people have a picture of Cinegenics that's maybe 25 years old, and that's not what goes on there now.
I invite them all to get a fresh perspective of who we are.
Thanks so much, man. Have a great day.
You too.
Big thank you to Rudy Inaba for joining us on the show today. That was really interesting. Again, as I mentioned at the forefront, this idea of VO2 max, how he said that if there's one thing to focus on the VO2 max, and it drags all these other things along. The lipid levels get better, the glucose gets better, weight drops, all these things. So a lot of times we tend to get really complicated with so many things out there when we start talking about living longer, living healthier, like all the blood work, all these things. This stuff's really important. But if you can focus on one thing, so that really simplifies it down, and focusing on VO2 max. And just for those of us who may have forgotten what VO2 max means, that means maximum volume of oxygen that we can consume. And the best way to improve your VO2 max is something called the Swedish 4x4 method. And we've talked about this in the past. What that means is you do some activity where you can do a constant level of fairly high effort output. I use a spin bike with a power meter. You can use a rowing machine. You can go outside and run up a hill, whatever your jam is. And the trick here is you want to do something for 4 minutes at a pretty consistent level that's quite challenging. And then you take about 3 minutes off, let your heart rate come down, and you do another 4 minutes. You do 4 rounds of that. And I can tell you by the 4th round, it can get really challenging. I've been doing this for a few months now, and I got to say, there's been really pretty dramatic impacts on my resting heart rate and my overall cardiovascular ability. I didn't think these things would move that quickly, but they do. So Cinegenics, really interesting, focusing on longevity, which is really quite different than the conversations I have with my primary care doctor. What a primary care does is they're essentially disease scanning. They're looking for, are you in a state of disease somewhere, and how can we treat that? Longevity medicine is quite different. What they're doing is they're looking for preventive, how we can avoid getting into that state in the first place. And I believe it was Rudy who talked about the sort of square wave. So rather than a sloping down decay over time, we're going to keep everything sort of where it's at, and then suddenly, boom, end. So that sounds like a pretty good plan to me. After a quick word from our sponsors, we're going to get with Just Try This and give you an update on what's going on around here.
Did you know that just pounding water all day is not going to keep you hydrated? You need the right mix of electrolytes in that water to help that water be absorbed properly and also to help your body function well with the right electrolytes. LMNT contains sodium, potassium, and magnesium, which are critical for helping our brains and our bodies function. One of the unfortunate facts is as we get older, it's harder to drink water, essentially because our thirst response is diminished. So we need to put extra emphasis on drinking water, staying hydrated with the right electrolytes. Of course, if you are pre-hypertensive or have hypertension, check with your doctor before having anything with sodium in it. For the rest of us, though, Element is a great solution. Go to drinkelement.com, that's DRINK, LMNT.com, and get yourself a free 8-serving sample pack with the purchase of any electrolyte drink mix.
This week on Just Try This, we're going to talk a little bit about parasympathetic activation. So what's that? So parasympathetic is rest and digest. That's the other side of the coin from sympathetic, which is fight or flight, which is where so many of us spend so much time, myself included. So what we need to do is to figure out a way to sort of ratchet everything down to get into this recovery phase. And a great way to do this is something called 4x4 breathing, which is not to be confused with Swedish 4x4 VO2 Max, quite the opposite. So what is this 4x4, otherwise known as box breathing? It can be called yogic breathing, can be called, if you're in the special forces, called tactical breathing. It's all the same thing. Essentially, what you're doing is you're doing an inhale, a slow inhale through your nose for a count of 4 beats, and then you hold for a count of 4 beats. Then you exhale for 4 beats, wait 4 beats, and repeat. And you do 4 rounds of that. And what that's going to do is it's going to slow everything down. It's going to signal through your vagus nerve that everything is okay. The world is fine. We can relax and chill out. So for some of you, the 4 beat might be too easy. So maybe you can up to 5, 6, 7, 8 beats with whatever works for you. And this is not an endurance contest. So this is not something you want to see like how long can you hold your breath sort of thing. It's really just a question of syncing up your breathing with your heart rate so that everything can dial down. This week on Just Try This, let's see if we can do a little 4x4 breathing and get that parasympathetic activated. What's going on around here this week? I am still in New York City, wonderful place to be. Why do people come to New York? Basically, people move to New York to get stuff done. So you have a lot of really highly motivated people who are good at what they do. And this is going to sound really bad, but it's about being judged. You're here to be judged. If you don't like being judged, you shouldn't live here because that's what's happening. You're being rated all the time, man. I mean, this is going to also sound kind of odd, but I sort of like it because it keeps me, it just keeps me on my game. It lets me know like, okay, I gotta get myself together before I get out of the house in the morning because people are going to look at me a certain way. I got to talk a certain way. I've got to keep my game high. And this is also not something that one can do ad nauseum. I find that 4 to 6 weeks is about all I'm good for. And then I need a break. And I've got to go out into the country. I've got to see some nature. And I have to go into a place where I don't have to keep the level so high. But at the moment, I'm really liking it. So this week in the newsletter over at Aegis, which again, you guys should all subscribe to this, we have Pam Auerbach, and we're going to talk about her FIRE lifestyle. So FIRE is financial independence, retire early. So what's that like? You want to check Pam out. She's got a lot of things figured out there. We've also this week got a chia seed pudding recipe. Hey, I want to tell you something funny. The most clicked on things in our newsletter are often our food posts. All of you seem to really love the food pudding out there. So that's wonderful. We're going to talk a little bit about cardiovascular, Cardio 101, why you need to do it and how to do it. We would love to hear from you guys. Subscribe to this show wherever you're listening to it. If you're watching it on YouTube, please leave us a comment. We always love to hear from you. We do our best to return all the comments to really stay in touch with you and give you the information that you need. Everybody, have a wonderful day. We're going to see you next week. Take care now.